G'day guys, Tell20 here and welcome back to City Skylines Miami. It's been a couple of weeks since the last episode. Sorry to all the people who've been hanging out for it. I actually wanted this episode to come out last weekend, but it ended up just becoming a really big build. So sorry about that. Good news is well, there's a couple of good news. First up, this is a long episode, as you can probably tell. And also, we make quite a lot of development in this episode. We plan out a lot of where the city is going to go. We do a lot of road layouts, we do a lot of zoning, and a lot of planning. Like a lot of planning in my head of how I want everything to end up being created within the city. So again, taking lots of inspiration from Miami, but I didn't want to just completely rebuild Miami. So the road layout and the where main features are of Miami don't exist within this city. The whole purpose of this series is to do something that is similar, so you get a very similar vibe from this build, but it is very different. So if you see some things in different places to where they really exist within Miami, then that's why. I'm just taking inspiration. It's honestly a really fun process because you're trying to do something really similar to a real life city, but you're trying to make it just look a little bit different. And it's just a really fun challenge, so I totally encourage you guys to give that a crack. If you're ever wondering how to design a city or how to build a city kind of like what I'm doing, just look at a city, get inspired, and try and do something similar. And no doubt you'll end up, catching the vibe, but probably putting your own spin on it. Guys, man, I have a bit of a struggle in this episode, I have to admit. A little bit down the track, I'm going to need your advice when it comes to zoning and moving forward in this city because I hit such a mental barrier. I do most of the explaining in the live play, which is it's honestly around the 25-minute mark. I told you it's a big episode. So yeah, I'm going to get your advice. I need your advice. So I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this episode. But first up, we are doing a lot of road layout. So, this is something you guys enjoy watching. I usually get rid of a lot of this sort of footage, but I decided to keep a bunch of it. But this is me trying to figure out where I want roads to go. And I honestly thought it was going to be really easy because, they're just a very grid-like pattern, very standard grid. Miami seems to be one of those cities that actually just goes full-blown grids. Like some cities have grids, some cities have like grids that sort of follow the contours of the land, but Miami, my god, you guys are pretty strict with your grids. So I did think that this is going to be really easy to just map out because I could just, stick with rectangles and main roads and all that sort of stuff, but it ended up being kind of challenging because, as you can tell, there's a whole bunch of little rivers, and I didn't really notice that many rivers. I sort of thought they were more based around where the, the big mouth of the water is, where the ocean is. But there's a lot of like hidden little rivers that snake in and out of like the main grid of Miami, and there's not a huge amount of them, but in order for me to try and capture the vibe of Miami, I sort of felt like I needed to put a little extra amounts than you'd usually find. And it's also about trying to scale everything into like the limitations of the scale of the game, if that makes sense. Because like the size of buildings are, a little bit out of proportion to the size of people and the size of roads and cars. So everything's like a little bit cartoony, I guess, particularly within the vanilla game. So I'm trying to scale down the city into a manageable space too. So I wanted to squeeze in as many of these rivers as possible. There's probably a few extra ones you can see. I ended up getting rid of a couple of them because they were just a little bit, I think it probably went a little bit too river crazy. But I decided to end up using mostly the canals because I felt like they created a much more flush and easy to manage type of river network. So decided to create a couple of them, and they will actually end up funneling into a lot of the suburbs that are surrounded by these little lakes. These planned communities where they build these very nice looking houses on these man-made lakes. They're very unusual. I've always found these places very unusual, but Miami seems to be full of them. So I wanted to have a bunch of them within this version of Miami too. So these rivers will end up sort of funneling into those communities, and I think it'll be really fun when we get to them because I think it'll just be really cool to see like different types of suburbs within like this one city, and I'm just looking forward to creating them. A lot of highways. So something that I wanted to really emphasize was, and something that I probably don't ever really achieve that well, because I usually create the highways before I create anything else, because I feel like they're very important in terms of infrastructure. And highways are also something that I really like to create within cities. I find the placement of highways really interesting. So I created all the highways first, but as my friend Besquigglehausen always says that you should always put the highways in last, because that is how they are created within real life. You start off with the grid of the city, and then they build the highways to cater for extra cars and more traffic. So yeah, realistically, you should be creating all the grids first. So I'm sort of like backwards mapping. I'm sort of like imagining where like all the infrastructure is and where all the buildings and all the city things are now, like in the current form, and then thinking, how did they get put there, over time, which is like a little bit of a weird way of doing it, but that's just how I do it. So what I was trying to say is, I created all these highways, but then I wanted to make it look like they were breaking up the grid quite a lot. So looking at Miami and looking at the structure of all the streets, you can see how these highways actually break up communities. They break up where the main roads are. They will, totally rip up a main road and then create a highway. And you can see where they've done that. It's really quite interesting. So I wanted to do something similar too. I wanted to really feel like a lot of these roads were disconnected because these highways have now been built, and they have disrupted the road pattern of the city. So that was kind of fun to do, and I really tried hard to stick with that. So you might actually see a little bit of it. You'll notice that a lot of the roads that I use all line up, and not strictly. So I will get, most roads will line up so that they are all just like totally straight. But as much as I was paying Miami out for having such a strict grid layout, like not every single road matches up. So I did want to also do that. It gave me a little bit of leeway when it comes to creating the road pattern, because I just knew that I didn't have to make sure that every single road was just like straight for forever. And I find that really strange because where I grow up, where I live currently, which is in Sydney, we don't really have this like grid, because we have like so many waterways, and we also have like such a hilly environment in Sydney. It's just be impossible to create such a grid-like pattern. So like doing this, I think I always create non-grids in my cities because I'm so used to it in my life. That's probably why so many of my friends who are from Europe, they always build European cities, because that's what they're used to, and I think I do the same thing. I always feel very strange creating just crazy straight roads, because that feels so unnatural to me. Whereas like in reality, when creating like Western style cities, then that's quite normal. And it's really only Sydney that is like that in Australia. Most cities within Australia, like I'm thinking Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth and all those sort of places, they have very, grid strict patterns. And they do that because you can fit in quite a lot of suburbs, and roads make sense that way. Whereas in Sydney, people just get lost. I get lost always because the roads are just like, they lead nowhere. So still working on the highways. I really didn't want these highways to take up too much space. I know that sounds a bit weird, but I didn't want it just to feel like there were highways everywhere. Whereas there are actually quite a lot of highways in my version of Miami. The actual real life Miami doesn't have quite as many highways as what I am actually putting in. I'm putting in far more than there really should be. But I really wanted to emphasize all these sort of highways. Once again, I think highways are quite interesting. I think they add a lot to to your cities, and they also help me to create different sections or different districts within my version, because we are scaling things down quite a lot. I had to sort of make some sacrifices, and one of the sacrifices was creating more highways. So that's what you can see. But what I also noticed was that there's like a real mix of elevated and ground level highways. So I thought there was actually just a whole bunch of elevated ones, but there was actually a bunch of highways that are actually just flush on the ground. So I had to try and figure out a way of how, you know, the main roads are still connected and making their way over to the other side of the highway, which was a little bit tricky. I find that always a bit of a struggle. Now I'm starting to figure out where I want the airport to go. So I'm not going to build the airport in this episode. I won't build it in the next one either. But I do need to figure out where this goes, because it's pretty important. It's, you know, it's the sort of thing where you'd probably build, like, I could easily just build the entire city and then forget that I have to build an airport. And I know a lot of you guys want me to build the airport, so I decided to place it somewhat close to the downtown. When I say close, it's like it's out of the downtown, but it's somewhat close. But still sits on the fringes of the city, I think. So it'll be pretty close to the Everglades. I think there'll be like a couple of suburbs from the airport to the Everglades, but it's not like heaps. By the way, if you guys don't know what the Everglades are, basically Miami is surrounded by these amazing natural environment called the Everglades, and it's like this swampy marshland that I wasn't really that familiar with until I started creating this project. And then, yeah, I was pretty amazed because, you know, quite often cities will have this, you know, as they sort of like progress into the natural environment, or sort of go like city and then suburbs and then farmland and like little bits of like industry. You know, there's like a progression of how things change and, you know, eventually become the natural environment again. That's actually the fringes of cities is always my favorite part. Whereas in Miami, you pretty much just go like, you know, city, suburbs, bam, Everglades. You know, there's this very clear line of where it stops, which is super interesting. And I'm pretty excited to create it because I think it's going to be really iconic, and you're going to go, that's totally Miami, because it's, you know, that's the way that the natural environment interacts with the city. And I think that'd be really cool. So I'm looking forward to it. Plus, it is going to make it so much easier for me to actually finish this project, because I will just be able to, you know, create a very straight line and go, you know what, Everglades, there, deal with it, you know. Don't have to worry about going into farmlands and going into, you know, outer suburbs. Though I will be doing parts of that because there are still quite a lot of farms around Miami. But I'll probably just do it in certain areas. Now I'm starting to figure out where I want the train line to go. So this is going to be the train line that's going to serve the cargo, but it also connects up to the central train station that we built a couple of episodes ago and goes into the heart of the downtown. But I did also want there to be some sort of connection to the airport, because the actual airport in Miami has this really cool transport hub where they have the like this train station that then connects up to the other greater area of Florida, and then there is this air train also there, and the metro connects there too. So I thought that'd be really cool to have something like that. So I decided to place it here, but it just wasn't really working because for some reason all the networks seem to meet like in this one location, which caused this crazy intersection. And I started to work on it, so there's like a bit of footage you're not seeing because I actually worked on it for like an hour trying to create this intersection. And then I was like, you know what, this intersection deserves like a whole episode. So I decided to scrap all that build and decided to leave it for another one. So that'll probably be the next episode. So I would like to do some sort of transport hub here, but I don't really know exactly what I'm going to do. And I don't think it'll be in this exact location because I don't think it's going to work. So, I mean, hence the reason why I'm doing all this build preparation now. It's kind of like a lot of planning what I'm doing. And you can see why it took so long, but it's very necessary because there's, you know, quite often I'll plan a city not quite as planned as what I'm doing right now. Like I won't design all the roads and figure out where all the intersections and highways and infrastructure is going to go, and then down the track that'll really bite me in the ass because I will not know how I'm going to connect everything up, and I'll have to like miss out on certain aspects of a city, or I'll have to like, you know, create things that are unrealistic. Whereas I really wanted the layout of the city to be fairly realistic, and I'm really quite happy with how it's turning out. Like, I know it's very vanilla, like a lot of my usual audience are giving me a bit of slack because I, am doing very vanilla, whereas I usually do quite a lot of modded and grabbing a lot of assets from the workshop, whereas this time around, not so much. But I actually just really loving the challenge in this series. There's something really fun about just trying to challenge yourself with these sort of like bare bones vanilla types of city planning. We're not trying to do crazy details, we're not trying to create something really hyper detailed or photorealistic. Instead, it's got a real different purpose, and I've really enjoyed that with this series. It's very refreshing, feels very new, feels very interesting. It's definitely piqued my interest. And it's also really fun, like, switch between the different series. So Marble Mountain, going for realism, but again, like, quite a lot of vanilla assets. And then this new series that I'm working on, I'm using quite a lot more custom assets, and I'm going for more photorealistic stuff. And by the way, none of you guys know anything about that. It's super duper secret, but it's really fun dipping in and out of the different series because trying to achieve different things in one, which is kind of fun. So like, I encourage you guys to give it a crack and try your skills out in a vanilla game if you're used to working with like so many custom assets. But in saying that, custom assets all the way. Don't turn your back on the custom assets like I have. Just for this series though, of course, because man, there's definitely angles and aspects of looking at this version of Miami, and I just go, ugh. If only I was using some custom assets, because that would really just change the whole mood to the series and just add so much extra detail. But no, that's not what we're doing. So again, just drawing a whole bunch of different roads. I really just wanted to like create a lot of the road layout in this episode, just to really get that idea of where I want suburbs to go and where I want different districts to sit to. And also these main roads are very important, and they're going to serve some very important parts of the infrastructure for this city, and they're going to basically like tell me where everything's going to sit. So it's very important that I actually figured out mostly where the main roads go out of anything else. You might also notice that not every suburb is exactly the same, so I did want there to be subtle differences between the different suburbs and districts. So you can see that some of the road layouts within some of the districts will, they'll be like a little bit closer together, and in this district you can see that I've actually drawn a little pathway behind where the houses are going to sit, because I wanted them to look different to the other areas. And look, this is where the problems started to arise. So remember how I said that, I said at the beginning of the episode, I kind of encountered a really big problem with what I was doing. And the problem is that, so basically I want to create the city quite quickly. I reckon I'm going to spend another 2 months on this series, which is not a huge amount of time, and I want to like build a lot of, like, I want the entire city done, which is very unheard of, when you're trying to build like a city within this game. It's like 2 months is not very long, particularly with the types of detail that I usually do, and trying to create the types of cities. So because I'm trying to build something so quickly and focus on layout and like realism from afar, I was going to zone, and that's a great method of creating a city really quickly. At least I thought so. It's been a while since I've zoned. I'm very out of touch with zoning. And the problem that I encountered is that, and it's something that I completely forgot about, is that when you zone an area within City Skylines, all the houses will eventually just look exactly the same. So all the houses close to the downtown will look exactly the same as the houses away from the downtown, like super far away from the downtown. And that's fine if you're just trying to make a profit, or if you're trying to keep your citizens happy. Whereas I don't really care about that sort of stuff. I would really like to make something that looks realistic from afar. So my idea was to zone, watch all the suburbs grow, and you just have this big city and it'd feel and look like Miami. The problem is that when I zone, so I end up zoning a whole bunch of these suburbs and watch them all grow. And the annoying thing is that because you're zoning everything and they can just grow however they like, you end up having suburbs and districts like close to the downtown that look exactly the same as suburbs and districts that look like way out into the, you know, on the edges of the city. And like everything looks exactly the same. You don't really get much say in how everything ends up growing as a growable. So, you know, that's fine if you are trying to build something quickly and big and you're trying to make a profit and make citizens happy, but that's not really my intention for this series. This series is more based around trying to create something that feels and looks like Miami. And I think my imagination when I was dragging out all those roads and putting down all the infrastructure was much higher than what the reality was. Even though I've been playing the game for like 5 years, I was just very disappointed by how everything looked. So I would love your opinion. What should I do? Do we not care about that? Like, who cares how everything looks when you zone? Because that's just the game. Or should I try and plop half the buildings and, you know, put a little bit more detail and effort into how the suburbs and the districts end up turning out like? What do? I would really love your opinion. So what I'm doing right now, you can actually see me placing down, like I'm still plopping down a bunch of buildings, but I, you know, probably plop down like 30% of the buildings and then I grow the rest of them. And this is a technique that I could amp up a little bit extra. I could probably plop down 50% of the buildings and try to influence like different types of buildings to grow and to, you know, try and make everything look a little bit more detailed and realistic from afar. Or do I just, like, who cares? We just let everything grow the way that the game intends it to. So hit me up, guys, in the comment section. I would really love your opinions. Basically, I'm going to be taking opinions of anyone who can convince me. So I'm not going to do a poll or anything like that. If you have a strong opinion on the matter and you know, want to write to me and give me, you know, influence me in any way, then please hit me up in the comment section. I'm not going to do any of this in the next episode. I'm going to work on some other stuff and we'll work on like fleshing out the city like in a couple of episodes time once I get a bit more of an idea of how I'm going to do it. So yeah, that was just a bit disappointing. I'm a little bit sad that it didn't turn out how I anticipated it to be in my head. But unfortunately, that's just, I guess, the limitation with the game. And it just brings back memories when I used to play the game, you know, back when it first came out. And you'd zone everything and you kind of go, oh, really? Sort of hoping it to look a little bit different than what it is right now. But I just really hate that you don't have too much of an influence. You know, within the vanilla game, you don't have too much of an influence of how districts are going to, you know, turn out without having to, you know, place down everything manually. It's a bit tricky. It's you're stuck within this real limbo of, you know, trying to build something really big quickly or trying to, you know, spend ages and ages and ages plopping down every little bit of detail. There's got to be a happy medium and we'll find it. We'll definitely find it. But yeah, that's all I have to say on the matter. I do talk more about it in the live play. So yeah, you guys have to listen to a bit of me complaining and, you know, trying to figure out how the hell we're going to do this. But to finish off the time lapse, although we still got another 4 minutes left, something that I was really looking forward to doing within this series, because I haven't really done it before, but something that I really wanted to do was, because we have such a strict grid and, you know, it's just like rectangle, 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 you know, and every road is pretty much connected exactly the same way. What I wanted to do is I wanted to create a lot of these like disruptions within the grid, you know, where they've got like a high school there, or they've got a museum, or they've got park. You know, you got these like roads that, you know, all of a sudden they go like, ah, you know what? Let's get rid of this road and we'll build a park there. Or we'll build a school, or we'll build an aquarium or a stadium or whatever. And it looks really cool from afar. I think it's like a really cool look. So I wanted to do something similar. So you saw that I disrupted a little bit of the pattern just by, you know, deleting a couple of the roads and putting down a park. But it was a little bit of a lazy attempt. Again, it was very much me just going, like, quickly doing it and then reflecting on it and thinking, you know what, we could probably do a little bit better. This is the time lapse of me just watching the city come to life. I mean, it does It's really cool when you start seeing it, you know, everything start to spawn and create, and the city just starts to expand out, which is what I do really love about zoning, you know, just watching everything, you know, become a city rather than when you place it all down, you just gotta, you know what you're doing. Whereas there's something really nice about just watching a city grow naturally. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see whether we do zoning or whether we don't, or whether it's a bit of a mix. But anyway, let's get into the live play. I'll do some more grumbling and talk to you a little bit more about my vision for the rest of this project. So I know I spend a lot of the time-lapse complaining about the way that the zoning works within this game, but you know what? Looking from afar and looking at how the city looks with all this expansion, I mean, you can't really get that upset about it, because I mean, it just looks so much better now. We have so much more suburbs now completed, and the city is just starting to look a lot more expanded, and it's starting to look like a real city, which is so nice. Whereas before we've just, you know, had this and the downtown and it's just been a little bit sparse. So now we're actually starting to look like a real city, which is damn good. And we have a fair amount of space to go. I mean, we got a lot of room to go, which means zoning will definitely help us out in that department, because it means we can actually get a lot more done. But, you know, I definitely have my complaints, which I'll talk about in a sec. But, I mean, you can see where the city limits are going to go. I mean, maybe you can, maybe you can't. We've actually got a pretty clear limit to where the city can go over here. I mean, there is a limit right there. So I dare say we're going to have the Everglades probably sitting about here, which, you know, it's fine. The Everglades are pretty, like, they're pretty prominent with their limits and how far, you know, pretty much where the Everglades are, nothing goes past it in terms of the city. So that's going to make my life so much easier when it comes to actually planning out the edges of the city. So I'm thinking that they're going to sit around here. And in terms of the rest, I mean, let's just go to that view. That's better. So you can sort of see where I'm planning to have the rest of the city sit. The border is going to be like something like this, potentially. I don't know. I mean, you can kind of see it. I don't want to go too much larger, you know, because if I do just keep it expanding, then what? We're never going to finish this project, especially if I start plopping down buildings. So you can sort of see where I want the city to expand out to. And we've honestly, I mean, I know the water doesn't count, but we've done like half. Can I call that half? Probably can't, can I? I mean, most of it's water. But, you know, we've made a big chunk. And in terms of planning, I mean, we figured out where the main interchanges are going to go, except for this one here, which I'm going to talk about a little later. But, you know, the infrastructure is pretty much down there, and it's just expanding out now. But I'm super excited to actually get the Everglades in so we can start seeing, you know, where the city is and where the city is not, rather than where it could potentially be, if that makes sense. So, like I said, it does look good from afar. You know, it's really starting to expand out. There are angles that look far better than others. But, you know, in terms of realism, there are just a couple of things that I think we could probably change. If I just change the way that I am zoning and developing out these suburbs. And let me explain. So my biggest complaint is that if I purely just zone, then everything is going to look exactly the same. And what I mean by that is suburbs over here are going to look exactly the same as suburbs over there and over here and over here and everywhere, which I think is, I don't know, I feel like I'm missing out on some, like a really great potential of having these like really distinct districts. And I just think that'd be a real shame to not have that. So for instance, you know, all the suburbs around these areas, these should be more like townhouses and apartments, and they should be sitting on much smaller blocks of land, and there should be more commercial in these sort of areas. Whereas I can't control that unless I am using plop the growables to place down those buildings. Because if I'm just zoning, these will just grow exactly the same way as these guys. So that is my other problem, is just the way that the districts are going to end up growing. And unfortunately, the district styles you can't do too much with if you're just playing with the vanilla assets. So that's, you know, going to be a bit of a problem. And another problem is the way that the buildings level up. So let me give an example. So for instance, There's a bunch of vanilla buildings that I really like. So this guy here, I like it. This one, I like it. And this guy, I like it. Like, these guys are fine. I don't mind these guys. In fact, I like all these buildings here. And I think they fit in an area like this. They obviously need some detail. We need to place down some extra trees, but they work. I think they're fine. What buildings don't work around here is this one. I mean, look, this guy even knows he doesn't belong here. He's sick as. Yeah, I know you're sick, mate, because you don't belong here. You need this guy. He should be out like way further out in these sort of areas, or over here. I don't want him spawning over here. I think that just looks a bit weird, because a building like that doesn't really belong next to a busy highway like this. Though he will grow there because, you know, I think the services and the land value are going to be pretty good. So all these buildings are going to start to level up. So if I get attached to the way that these buildings look, that's going to be a problem because they're just going to change as the game progresses. And that's not a bad thing if you want to make money and make citizens happy and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I have a little bit more of a focus on trying to detail and make things a little bit more realistic. So that's going to be a problem. Plus, there's buildings that I don't like this one. Look at that one compared to this one and this one. It is so disproportionate. Like, what is going on? It looks like it's from a completely different game. And not to mention that if I was to start plopping down districts in a really smart fashion, it means that I could actually probably detail up just a touch, just a little touch. And by what I mean by that is, you know, I could actually get, let's just minimize that. But like the trees, I could actually get the trees to look just a little bit more natural, a little bit more how they should look if they were right in, you know, the heart of the city, or if they're on the outskirts of the city. I could hide some of the more ugly trees that I really dislike. For instance, this guy we could get rid of, and that guy we could hide just a little bit. And we could actually make our districts just look a little bit better. You know, not like a huge amount of detail. Obviously, you would be doing way more in something like Marble Mountain, but, you know, we could actually do something like this. You know, detail it up just a touch, and then we could just copy it into another location like that, potentially. That's just an idea. Just an idea, guys. Just an idea. You know, it's just, there's just areas that I really just hate to look at, which is just a little bit unfortunate. Because if you go to just a little bit of effort, like placing down parking lots in an area like that, and placing down a couple of buildings like I have here, which look alright, and then you get that. So I feel like I might need to just take a little bit more care when it comes to zoning, because there's areas that I've taken that little extra step of care, and then there's areas that I've just zoned and watched grow, and you can really tell the difference. So for instance, a place like, no, we'll get to that in a second. A place like this one. Okay, so over here, I've pretty much just zoned and watched grow, and you can see, I mean, you've got like bits of grass over here, and you've got these crazy buildings here that I'd never place down in a million years, and you've got some buildings that are the right size for a district like this. So this one and this one and this one, these are great. They're fine. Like, I'm happy with them. They're totally fine. But then eventually these guys will end up growing into this guy, and I don't want this guy. I mean, this is something that you'd expect in the downtown, and that's about it. But in an area like this, it just doesn't belong. And that's not like such a problem if it's hidden amongst these other buildings, but even from afar, you can tell that, you know, you get like a bunch of them all bunched up together, and even these guys spawning in, you know, pretty much the exact same location. That's where we're gonna have a problem. And yeah, just a thought. Just a little thought. Whereas that's just pure zoned. This over here is a little bit more thought out. And when I say a little bit more thought out, I've spent maybe like 2 minutes tops detailing this up. And all I've really done, I mean, I've zoned parts of it. I've also plopped down a whole bunch of buildings. So a couple of these guys I've actually just placed down manually because I like them. And then other spots, I've just like placed down parking lots and left like green zones unzoned and other like concrete areas unzoned. And I think the effect is just that much better. And you can really tell. You know? At least I know. That's what I'm thinking, at least. But guys, look, I'm after your suggestions, obviously. So please let me know. I mean, there's benefits for both methods of, developing out a city. And I'm a little bit torn between the two options, plopping with a little bit more care and mixed zoning, or are we just going to zone the whole thing and just let it expand out and let it do its thing? Because I see the benefits for both and I just can't figure out which one I like best. Because this one I hand plopped and you can really tell that there's a little bit more effort into this, whereas something like this, it's no bueno. And we could just let it expand out like this, but I just don't know. But anyway, I'm going to wait for your opinions, guys. Let me know in the comment section. And if you want to hit me up on Twitter or get in touch however you like, then just let me know, because I desperately need some ideas. The next episode, though, we aren't going to focus on the suburbs. I would like to move on to the airport, which is something I'm pretty keen to get done. I've left this whole space. I've dedicated this whole area for infrastructure for the airport, for the actual physical airport, which I'm planning on using. What am I planning on using? I'm using this guy, which, it's not great. It is what it is. I mean, yeah. I think it's the best looking airport out of all of them. We will detail it up a little bit. I'm going to try and make this look as best as I possibly can with the assets that I'm given. It's going to be a challenge. What's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, is the infrastructure, because this, we have to figure out what we're going to do here, and that's going to be massive. So who knows? Next episode, we might get the whole airport done. We might just get this done. We'll have to see how much we conquer. I also got rid of a couple of waterways. There was a waterway going through here, but I got rid of that. A few things I've done off camera, which I'm sure you can probably tell. But guys, that's it. Let me know what you think. If you have any ideas, suggestions, hit me up. I am desperate for some suggestions. I really value those opinions, guys. So get them in. And the episode after, we'll get back to developing out the city. I really would like to expand this out. There's so much room to go, and I am actually really keen to see it start to develop. But guys, that is pretty much it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I do want to give a special shout out to some of my patrons like Tran, Rodney Green, and Matthew Lewis. Guys, thank you so much for your support. I will see you in the next one. Bye.